I woke up to the sound of the filtration system rattling in the corner of my apartment. My bed was a slab of synthetic fabric stretched over a frame that had seen better days, but it was better than the floor. The city outside was already alive with the sound of machinery grinding and clanging in the distance, signaling another day of toil. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the sting of fatigue that no amount of sleep seemed to shake off anymore. But it didn't matter. There was work to be done, and a day missed was a day I couldn't afford. I dragged myself to the corner of the room where my clothes were piled. The same dull grey uniform waited for me, the one mandated by the factory, designed for efficiency and nothing else. As I dressed, I looked at the small, cracked mirror hanging on the wall. 34 years old, and I looked a decade older. But who didn't down here? The city was divided into two worlds: the heights, where the elites lived in their pristine towers, and the depths, where the rest of us scraped by. Up there they had everything. Genetic modifications that made them smarter, faster, better in every conceivable way. And then there were the symbiotes, those alien creatures they bonded with to gain abilities that were the stuff of legends to people like me. Down here, though, we were the forgotten ones. The dirt under their shoes. I was just another body in the factory, another faceless worker in a sea of grey, toiling away for the scraps that kept us alive, but never thriving. Every day was the same. I'd take the tram, a rattling, decrepit thing held together by nothing more than rust and hope, through the bowels of the city to the factory. The ride was always packed, filled with the weary faces of the workers, all of us crammed in together like cattle. No one spoke. No one had the energy or the inclination. We were all just trying to make it to the end of the day. The factory itself was a monolith of steel and concrete, stretching up into the murky sky. We worked in shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, and the cycle never stopped. My job was simple. Assembly line work, bolting together parts of the machines that the upper classes used. Day in and day out, I stood at my station, repeating the same motions until my muscles hurt and my mind numbed. There was no room for error. Mistakes meant docked pay or worse, and nobody could afford that. As I worked, I often thought about the elites, those lucky few who had it all. I imagined what it would be like to be one of them, to live in a world where you weren't constantly looking over your shoulder, waiting for the next blow to fall. Up there, they didn't worry about the things we did. They didn't have to. With their genetic modifications, they were practically a different species altogether. And then there were the symbiotes. I'd heard stories, rumors, really, about what they could do. Bonding with one of those alien creatures was supposed to unlock potential that no human could ever achieve on their own. Superhuman strength, speed, intelligence. The kind of power that could take someone from the depths and put them on top of the world. But that was just a fantasy. Down here, people like me didn't get those chances. We were the expendable ones, the ones who kept the city running while the elites reaped the benefits. I'd thought about it, though, what it would be like to have that kind of power, to finally break free from this life. But I knew better. Those kinds of thoughts were dangerous. They led to trouble, and trouble down here meant a quick trip to the bottom of the pile, or a visit from the enforcers. But still, what if there was a way out? What if just once I could get my hands on something that would change everything? The idea was intoxicating, but it was also absurd. No one got out of here unless they had something the elites wanted, and what could a factory worker like me possibly offer? As the shift ended, I filed out with the others, a mass of grey uniforms trudging back to the tram. The city was starting to dim. I didn't have the energy to go straight home, so I wandered the streets for a while, avoiding the more dangerous areas where the gangs prowled. I ended up in a small alley, tucked away from the main thoroughfares, where the sounds of the city were more distant. I leaned against the wall, taking a moment to catch my breath, when I noticed a figure at the other end of the alley. He was dressed in a long coat, the kind that marked him as someone who didn't belong down here. He approached, and as he got closer, I could see the glint of something in his eyes. There was a sly, knowing smile on his face, one that made me instinctively wary. I'd seen that look before, on people who dealt in things best left alone. "You look like a man who's tired of being stepped on," he said, his voice smooth and quiet. I didn't respond, just kept my eyes on him, ready to bolt if he made a move. He chuckled, as if he could read my thoughts. "Relax. I'm not here to cause trouble. In fact, I think I might have a way to help you out." "Not interested," I said, pushing off the wall and starting to walk away. I'd been around long enough to know that offers like that always came with strings attached. "Don't be so hasty," he called after me. "This isn't your typical offer. I've got something special, something that could change your life." I stopped. Against my better judgment, I turned back to face him. "What kind of something?" The man's smile widened. "The kind that gets you out of here. The kind that puts you up there with them." He gestured toward the distant towers. It was the kind of thing I'd dreamed about, but I knew better than to let my guard down. "And what's the catch?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No catch, just a price. And trust me, it's one you can afford. I've got access to a symbiote, one that's off the books. Unregistered, but powerful. You take this, and you won't be just another worker anymore. You'll be something more." My heart skipped a beat at the word symbiote. It was impossible. Those things were tightly controlled, only given to the elites. But the way he said it, the certainty in his voice. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small metallic case. When he opened it, I saw a tiny, writhing creature, encased in a containment unit. It looked almost delicate, but I could feel the raw power coming from it, even at a distance. "This is your chance," the man said. "Take it, and you'll never have to worry about anything down here again." I stared at the creature. This was insane. Taking something like that, especially an unregistered one, was a death sentence if I got caught. But the alternative was spending the rest of my life in the factory, grinding away until I died in obscurity. The man could see the conflict on my face. "Think about it," he said. "You're at the bottom now. What do you really have to lose?" I looked at the symbiote again. It was everything I'd ever wanted, right there in front of me. And I was tired of being at the bottom. "All right, I'll do it." The man's smile widened, and he closed the case with a snap. "Good choice. Meet me at the old warehouse on Canal Street tonight. We'll get you set up." The streets were quieter than usual as I made my way to the old warehouse on Canal Street. A thick fog clung to the ground, swirling around my feet as I walked. My thoughts were a tangled mess. The same questions repeating in my mind. What was I getting myself into? Was this really worth it? But each time those doubts surfaced, I pushed them back down, reminding myself that this was my chance, maybe my only chance, to escape the life I'd been shackled to for so long. The warehouse was barely holding together, with rusted metal sheets peeling off the walls and broken windows gaping like empty eyes. I paused for a moment, my gut twisting with fear and anticipation. I hadn't told anyone where I was going, not that there was anyone who would care. My interactions were limited to the grunts and nods of fellow factory workers, and those hardly qualified as friendships. No one would miss me if something went wrong tonight. But that was the point, wasn't it? No ties, no strings, nothing holding me back. I slipped inside through a gap in the wall, the metal edges scraping against my uniform. Inside, the darkness was thick, almost tangible, but I could make out a few scattered lights at the far end of the warehouse. The man from the alley stood beneath one of them. He wasn't alone. A second figure, thinner and jittery, hovered nearby, fussing over a table covered in equipment that looked more like torture devices than medical tools. "You're here," the man said, his voice carrying a note of approval. "I wasn't sure you'd show. I made a deal. I'm here to see it through." He gestured to the table where the jittery figure was now laying out a set of surgical instruments. "This is Dr. Harlan," the man said. "He's going to take care of the procedure. Don't worry, he's done this before." I didn't respond. My eyes were fixed on the instruments, each one more sinister than the last. Dr. Harlan caught my stare and gave a nervous chuckle, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his glasses. "It'll be quick, I promise," he mumbled. "We'll have you out of here in no time. A new man." I didn't like the way he said that, but I wasn't about to back out now. "Let's get this over with," I said, forcing the words out past the lump in my throat. "Take off your shirt and lie down on the table." I hesitated for just a moment before complying, stripping off my shirt and climbing onto the cold, hard surface of the table. The metal pressed against my skin, sending a chill through me. Dr. Harlan moved quickly, strapping my arms and legs down with leather restraints. "Just a precaution," he said, though his voice was anything but reassuring. "The symbiote can be reactive during the implantation." I swallowed hard. I hadn't fully understood what I was agreeing to until now. The idea of having something implanted in me, something alive, something alien, was terrifying in a way I hadn't anticipated. The man produced the metallic case, opening it to reveal the symbiote once more. In the low light, I could see it more clearly now. A small, writhing mass of translucent flesh. It looked fragile, almost delicate. "This is it," the man said, holding the case close to my face so I could get a good look at the creature. "Once it's inside you, there's no going back. You'll be changed forever." Dr. Harlan prepared a syringe, filling it with a dark liquid. "This will numb the pain, somewhat," he said, though the look in his eyes suggested it wouldn't do much. The needle pierced my skin, and I felt the cold burn of the liquid spreading through my veins. Almost immediately, a heavy numbness settled over me, dulling the edges of the fear that had been gnawing at my insides. But the dread, the deep, primal fear of what was coming next, that was still there. "Ready?" the man asked, though he didn't wait for an answer. He handed the symbiote to Dr. Harlan, who positioned it just above the base of my neck. There was a moment of stillness, a breathless pause where everything seemed to hang in the balance. Then, with a sickening squelch, the symbiote was pressed against my skin, and I felt it. Really felt it, for the first time. The thing wasn't just sitting on me, it was digging in, burrowing beneath my skin, fusing with my flesh. I could feel it moving, writhing its way through my muscles, latching onto my spine. The world swirled before me as a rush of queasiness took over, the pain sharp and searing, even through the numbing agent. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body convulsed against the restraints, every muscle tensing as the symbiote wormed its way deeper into me. The pain was unbearable, a white-hot fire that consumed every nerve, but beneath it, there was something else. An electric current, a surge of energy that passed through me, making my heart race and my mind spin. Dr. Harlan muttered something under his breath, but I couldn't make out the words. The man leaned in close, a look of malicious pleasure on his face. "It's taking hold," he said, his voice a low rumble in my ears. "You're going to be powerful, more powerful than you've ever imagined." But all I could think about was the pain, the horrific sensation of the symbiote merging with my body. I felt it latch onto my spine, tendrils snaking out to wrap around my nerves, sending jolts of electricity through me. My vision darkened, spots dancing in front of my eyes as I teetered on the edge of consciousness. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the pain stopped. The numbness spread, enveloping me in a cold, heavy blanket, and I felt the symbiote settle in, its movements slowing until they were nothing more than a faint thrumming deep within me. I was left gasping for breath, my body slick with sweat, as the world slowly came back into focus. Dr. Harlan stepped back, his face drawn as if he'd just witnessed something unspeakable. The man, on the other hand, looked pleased. "Welcome to your new life," he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "How do you feel?" I didn't know how to answer. The pain was gone, replaced by an overwhelming sense of... It wasn't exactly power, not yet, but there was a feeling of potential, a buzzing under my skin, like I was a coiled spring waiting to be released. Dr. Harlan quickly unstrapped me. "Take it easy for the next few hours," he advised, his voice shaky. "The symbiote needs time to fully integrate." I sat up slowly, my head spinning. My body felt different, heavier somehow, but also lighter, more responsive. I clenched my fist and the muscles in my arm rippled with strength I hadn't felt in years. The man watched me closely, a thin smile on his lips. "You'll start to notice the changes soon," he said. "Strength, speed, heightened senses. It'll take some time to fully adjust, but once you do, there'll be no stopping you." I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me was still reeling from the experience, from the sheer intensity of it all. But another part of me, a darker, more primal part, was already beginning to understand. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? A chance to be more, to be better, to finally rise above the muck and filth of the life I'd been condemned to. "Thank you." The man nodded. "You've made the right choice. Now go home, rest, and when you wake up, you'll be ready to start your new life." I stood up, my legs unsteady beneath me, but they held. I reached for my shirt and pulled it on, wincing as the fabric brushed against the tender spot at the base of my neck where the symbiote had been implanted. The man handed me a small vial of clear liquid. "Take this if the pain gets too much, but try not to use it unless you absolutely have to. The symbiote will adjust faster if you let it work without interference." I took the vial, slipping it into my pocket. The man gave me one last appraising look, then turned away, already moving on to whatever his next business was. Dr. Harlan was busy packing up the equipment. I left the warehouse without another word, stepping back out into the foggy streets. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that came before a storm. The walk home felt like a haze, my mind too preoccupied to notice the familiar streets and alleys. All I could think about was the symbiote, the way it had felt as it merged with me, the way it still felt now, just beneath my skin. The apartment was just as I'd left it, small, dingy, with the same stench in the air. But tonight, it felt different, like a cocoon I would soon shed. I collapsed onto the bed. The symbiote was quiet now, a dull thrum in the background of my thoughts, almost like it was sleeping. I wasn't sure if I'd be able to sleep, not after what I'd just been through. But as soon as my head hit the pillow, the darkness took me. For the first time in years, my dreams weren't of the factory. They were of something vast and unknowable, something that stretched out into the cosmos. And then, just as quickly as it had begun, the dream shifted. I was back in the city, standing atop one of the towers, looking down at the world I'd left behind. But I wasn't alone. There was something inside me. Something that whispered in a language I didn't understand, something that promised power beyond my wildest dreams. I woke up with a start, the echo of that voice still ringing in my ears. The sun was just beginning to rise. I could feel the symbiote now, more clearly than before. It was awake. I could finally be something more. The first thing I noticed was the absence of pain. The usual aches and stiffness that greeted me every morning were gone. In their place was a feeling of lightness, as if the years of wear and tear on my body had been erased overnight. I sat up in bed, half expecting the old, familiar twinges to return, but they didn't. Instead, there was something else, a rhythm that wasn't mine. I reached up to the base of my neck, where the symbiote had been implanted. The skin was still tender, the area slightly swollen, but I could feel it beneath the surface. A foreign presence, something alive and aware. I quickly pulled my hand away as if the symbiote might react to my touch. The apartment felt different too, like the walls had shifted during the night. I noticed details I'd never seen before. the tiny cracks in the ceiling, the dust motes floating in the beams of light that filtered through the grimy window. My senses were sharper, more attuned to the world around me, and it was both exhilarating and terrifying. The factory uniform lay crumpled on the floor where I'd left it the night before. I stared at it, the thought of putting it back on making my stomach churn. The idea of returning to that life, of standing at the assembly line with the symbiote inside me, felt wrong. But what choice did I have? I was still just a worker, and I had to keep up appearances. No one could know what I'd done. As I dressed, I became acutely aware of how my body moved. The symbiote was there in every motion, guiding me, enhancing me. My muscles acted with an almost supernatural finesse and accuracy. It was like I was wearing a new suit, one that fit perfectly, but came with its own set of rules. The tram ride to the factory was the same as always, packed, grim, the air heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies and stale sweat. But I wasn't the same. I could feel it in the way people moved around me, the subtle glances they threw my way, as if they sensed something different about me but couldn't quite place it. I stood taller, while everyone else seemed to shrink away, their eyes averted. When I arrived at the factory, the familiar sights and sounds greeted me. The clang of metal, the hiss of steam, the dull roar of machinery. But the symbiote had changed the way I perceived it all. The noise was no longer just a background hum. It was a symphony of mechanical precision, every sound distinct and purposeful. I could almost see the inner workings of the machines, the way they meshed together to create the final product. My workstation was the same as ever. A dull assembly line, my tools laid out in perfect order. But today, everything felt different. I started working, and the routine tasks that had once taken effort now felt effortless. My hands moved with a speed and accuracy that astonished me, the symbiote guiding my every action. I wasn't just assembling parts, I was manipulating them, bending them to my will. Time flew as I worked, my mind buzzed with energy, a sense of purpose that I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just another cog in the machine anymore. I was the machine, and it felt good. But as the day wore on, I began to notice the other changes. My senses, already heightened, started to overwhelm me. The noise of the factory grew louder, the smells more pungent, until it was all I could do to keep my focus. My vision sharpened to the point where I could see the smallest imperfections in the metal, the tiniest specks of dirt on the floor. It was too much. I had to get out. I made it through the rest of the shift by sheer force of will, my mind buzzing with the need to escape. As soon as the end of shift bell rang, I was out the door, barely acknowledging the others as I pushed my way through the crowd. The tram ride back to my apartment was swift, my thoughts consumed by the results of my recent experiences. The symbiote wasn't just enhancing me, it was changing me. What had I done to myself? Back in the apartment, I could hear every creak of the floorboards, every drip of water from the leaky faucet. I felt like I was coming apart at the seams, my senses on overdrive, the symbiote thrumming with a restless energy that I couldn't control. I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening to me. I pulled out the vial of liquid the man had given me, staring at it for a long moment. The idea of dulling the symbiote's influence was tempting, but there was a part of me that resisted. This was what I'd wanted, wasn't it? The power, the strength, the chance to be something more. Taking the liquid felt like a step backward, a way of admitting that I couldn't handle what I'd chosen. But the alternative was losing myself completely, becoming something I didn't recognize. The thought terrified me more than anything. In the end, I put the vial away. I needed to understand what was happening before I made any decisions. The symbiote was a part of me now, and I couldn't just shut it off. I had to learn how to live with it, how to control it. The night passed restlessly. I barely slept, and when I did, my dreams were filled with alien landscapes, visions of places and things that made no sense to my human mind. Morning came too quickly, the light filtering through the window like a blade slicing through the darkness. I felt no better, but I knew I had to keep going. I couldn't let the symbiote take over. Not yet. I dressed quickly, my movements mechanical, and made my way out into the city. The streets were already bustling with activity, the same grim routine playing out as it did every day. But I wasn't the same, and it was becoming harder to pretend that I was. I kept my head down, avoiding eye contact, trying to blend in. But I could feel the symbiote's influence growing, urging me to do more, to be more. It wasn't just a presence anymore. It was a voice, whispering in the back of my mind, telling me things I didn't want to hear. I fought it as best I could, but the strain was taking its toll. By the time I reached the factory, I was a bundle of nerves. Every noise was too loud, every smell too sharp. I was on the verge of breaking, and I knew it. I forced myself through another shift, the symbiote's influence growing stronger with every passing hour. My work was flawless, my movements precise, but inside I was unraveling. The voice in my head was getting louder, demanding that I listen, that I obey. I barely made it through the day. By the time the shift ended, I was shaking, my hands slick with sweat, my heart racing. I stumbled out of the factory, the world around me a chaotic mix of sound and color that I couldn't process. I needed help. I needed to talk to someone who understood what was happening to me. The man from the alley, the one who had given me the symbiote, was the only one who could help. He had to know more about what I was experiencing, about what the symbiote was doing to me. I headed back to the alley where we'd first met. The city felt increasingly confining, with the buildings rising ever higher and the streets growing more cramped. When I reached the alley, it was empty. I stood there for a moment, trying to steady my breathing, trying to calm the symbiote inside me. "He's not here," a voice said, startling me. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. A man stepped out of the shadows, his face half hidden in the darkness. He wasn't the one I was looking for, but there was something about him that put me on edge. "What do you want?" He smiled. "I've been watching you," he said, his tone casual, almost conversational. "You're not like the others, are you?" I didn't know how to respond. The symbiote stirred inside me, reacting to the man's presence, but I forced it down, keeping my expression neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." The man's smile widened. "Don't play dumb with me. I know what you've done. I know what's inside you." My heart skipped a beat. "Who are you?" He took a step closer, and I instinctively backed away, my body tense. "Let's just say I have an interest in people like you," he said. "People who are willing to take risks, to do whatever it takes to rise above their station." I didn't like where this was going. "What do you want from me?" The man tilted his head, studying me with those cold eyes. "It's not about what I want," he said. "It's about what you want, and what you're willing to do to get it." I felt the symbiote stir again, responding to the man's words, feeding off the tension in the air. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, though I knew it was a lie. We both did. He smiled again, that same unsettling smile. "You will," he said, pausing for effect before adding, "The name's Riven, by the way. Remember it. You and I will be seeing a lot more of each other." I couldn't just let Riven walk away. The symbiote was stirring again, a sharp, insistent beat that matched the rising panic in my chest. I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something huge, something that could swallow me whole if I wasn't careful. It was too much to take in, and I needed answers. I needed to understand what the hell was happening. "Wait!" I called out, my voice cracking as it left my throat. Riven stopped mid-step, turning back to face me with that same unsettling calm. His eyes sparkled in the dim light, and for a moment I wondered if they were truly human. "What is it?" he asked, his tone almost patient, as if he had all the time in the world. He didn't seem surprised that I'd stopped him. In fact, it was like he'd expected it. "I need to know," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "What's happening to me? What's this symbiote really doing?" Riven studied me for a moment. Then he sighed, a sound that seemed almost weary. "You're not ready to hear the full truth," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But I can show you a part of it, enough to help you understand why you're so important, why the symbiote chose you." Riven stepped closer, his presence somehow more imposing despite his calm demeanor. "The symbiote isn't just an enhancement, Ethan. It's a key to unlocking something much greater than you or I. You've been given a gift, one that comes with great responsibility." "Responsibility? What kind of responsibility?" He leaned in. "The symbiote has connected you to something ancient, something that has been waiting for the right time, the right person, to guide it back into our world. You're that person, Ethan. You're the one who will bring about the coming." The coming! I felt like a parrot, repeating everything he said because none of it made sense. The words were just sounds, empty of meaning. Riven straightened up, his eyes never leaving mine. "The coming is a monumental event, one that will reshape our world and bring it into alignment with forces that have been watching us for millennia. The symbiotes are their instruments, their way of reaching into our reality. But not all symbiotes are the same. Yours is different. It's stronger, more attuned to the will of the elders." I blinked, trying to process what he was saying. Elders, watching us. None of it made sense, but at the same time it felt like a puzzle piece clicking into place. The visions, the flashes of alien worlds, they were all connected to this, whatever this was. Why me? Why did it choose me? "Because you were willing," Riven said simply. "Most people are too afraid to take the step you did. They're content to live their lives in the muck, never aspiring to something greater. But you wanted more." I shook my head, feeling like I was trapped in a nightmare. "I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," Riven interrupted, his tone almost gentle. "But now you do. And now you have a choice to make." "A choice?" I looked at him, confused. "What choice?" "To embrace your destiny or to fight against it. But let me be clear, Ethan. Resistance is futile. The symbiote is a part of you now, and its influence will only grow stronger. You can either accept what you're becoming, or you can go mad trying to deny it." "What do I do?" Riven smiled, but it was a smile without warmth. "Come with me tomorrow night. There's a place where we gather, those of us who understand the truth. There, you'll meet others like you, others who have accepted their roles in the coming. Together, we'll prepare for what's to come." "Where?" "An old church," Riven said, his voice taking on a reverent tone. "It's a place of great power, a place where the veil between our world and theirs is thin. Meet me there and I'll show you what you've been chosen to do." He handed me a piece of paper with an address scrawled on it. "Tomorrow night," he repeated. "After the sun sets." I stared at the paper. It was all happening too fast, too suddenly, but I knew there was no turning back. The symbiote was in control now, its influence weaving through my thoughts, pushing me toward a decision that wasn't really mine to make. "I'll be there," I said. Riven nodded, satisfied. "Good. You've made the right choice, Ethan. Trust me, soon you'll understand everything." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows, as if he had never been there at all. I stumbled back to my apartment, my thoughts a tangled mess. Every time I tried to focus, the symbiote would send a wave of energy through me that blurred the edges of my thoughts. It was like trying to hold on to water, the ideas slipping through my fingers no matter how hard I tried to grasp them. Every time I closed my eyes, the visions returned. Flashes of grey-skinned beings. I could feel them watching me. They spoke in a language I couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. They were waiting for me, expecting me to fulfill my role in whatever nightmare scenario they had planned. By the time dawn broke, I was a wreck. The symbiote had become more active. I could feel it pushing against the boundaries of my mind, testing the limits of my control. I spent the day in a trance, drifting from one thought to the next without any clear direction. I felt like I was on the verge of a revelation or a breakdown, I couldn't tell which, but whatever it was coming, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. When night fell, I left my apartment without a second thought. The address Riven had given me was burned into my mind, guiding my steps even as the symbiote guided my thoughts. I moved through it like a ghost, my mind focused on one thing, getting to that church, finding out what Riven had planned for me. The church was just as Riven had described, old, abandoned, forgotten by the world. It stood at the edge of the city, hidden away in a tangle of overgrown weeds and crumbling stone. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors and stepped inside. The interior was dark, the floor covered in dust, the pews long since abandoned, but in the center of the room stood a massive statue, its form just visible in the shadows. Riven was waiting for me, along with a group of robed figures. Their faces were hidden, their eyes fixed on the ground as I approached. When they saw me, they fell to their knees, their voices rising in a chant that sent a shiver down my spine. Riven stepped forward. "Welcome, Ethan," he said, his voice carrying an edge of reverence. "This is where it begins." I looked around, my senses on high alert. The symbiote was moving wildly now, its energy surging through me like a storm. "What is this place?" Riven gestured to the statue. "This is a place of power, a place where the veil between our world and theirs is thin. It's here that you'll fulfill your destiny, that you'll open the way for the elders to return." I turned my attention to the statue, and my breath caught in my throat. It was massive, towering over the room, but it was the figure itself that drew my attention. A grey-skinned being, its eyes glowing with a cold, unearthly light. The same being I'd seen in my visions. Fear tightened around my chest, but I forced it down, focusing on Riven. "And what happens then?" "Then," Riven said, a smile curling at the edges of his lips, "the world will change. The elders will guide us, lead us into a new era. And you, Ethan, will be at the center of it all. You are the chosen one, the one who will bring about the coming." The followers continued their chant, their voices rising and falling in a rhythm that matched the beat of the symbiote. I felt like I was being swept up in a tide of energy, pulled towards something exhilarating and terrifying. Riven placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm. "It's time, Ethan. Are you ready to embrace your destiny?" The symbiote surged inside me, its energy flooding my mind with visions, images of a world transformed. The fear was still there, but so was something else, something darker, something that wanted to see this through. "I'm ready," I said. Riven nodded. "Good, then let us begin." The chanting of the followers filled the air, their voices merging into a low drone that seemed to vibrate through the walls of the ancient building. The sound thrummed through me, syncing with the symbiote, making it impossible to distinguish where the chant ended, and my heartbeat began. Riven stood at the base of the massive statue, his hands raised as if in supplication. The statue towered above him, an imposing figure carved from stone, yet somehow alive. The grey-skinned alien depicted in the stone was both terrifying and majestic, its eyes seeming to watch us all with an ancient, inscrutable look. "This is your moment, Ethan," Riven intoned, his voice cutting through the chanting like a knife. "You were chosen for this. The symbiote inside you is not just a tool, it is the key that will unlock the gate between worlds." The symbiote responded to his words, a surge of energy coursing through me, nearly knocking me off my feet. "Come," Riven said, gesturing for me to approach the statue. My legs moved of their own accord, the symbiote driving me forward. As I reached the base of the statue, Riven handed me a cup filled with a thick liquid. The scent of it was overpowering. "Drink," Riven commanded. "This will complete the bond between you and the symbiote. It will prepare your body for what is to come." The symbiote urged me on, its influence growing stronger, drowning out my thoughts until all that was left was a single, insistent command. "Drink." I raised the cup to my lips and drank. The liquid was viscous, sliding down my throat like oil. It burned as it went, filling my stomach with a heat that spread outward, seeping into every cell. The reaction was immediate. The symbiote surged within me, a tidal wave of energy that sent me to my knees, my body convulsing as it adjusted to the sudden influx of power. My vision exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes, the church around me warping as if reality itself was unraveling. The chanting reached a fever pitch. Through the haze of pain and power, I saw grey-skinned beings, just like the one depicted in the statue, stepping out of the shadows. They spoke, not with words, but with thoughts. "Welcome, Chosen One. You are the harbinger, the key. Through you, we will return." I tried to respond, but my voice was lost, drowned out by the presence of the symbiote. It was no longer just a part of me. It was me, and I was it. Riven's voice broke through the fog. "Tie him to the statue," he ordered, and I felt rough hands seize my arms, pulling me to my feet. My body was limp, unresponsive, the symbiote's influence so strong that it took all my effort just to keep my eyes open. The followers bound me to the statue with thick ropes, their chants never faltering. I could feel the stone pressing against my back, cold and unyielding, as if it was absorbing the heat from my body. Riven stepped in front of me, his face ablaze with eagerness. "The time has come, Ethan," he said, his voice trembling with excitement. "The portal will open, and the elders will return to claim this world. You are the catalyst, the bridge between our world and theirs." I wanted to scream, to break free from the ropes and run, but my body wouldn't respond. The symbiote had taken over completely, its power coursing through me, holding me in place even as my mind screamed. The chanting reached a climax, the followers' voices blending into a single powerful note that seemed to shake the foundations of the church. The statue began to glow, a soft light emanating from its eyes, its surface cracking as if something inside was trying to break free. Then, with a sound like thunder, the statue split open, the stone falling away to reveal a swirling vortex of light and shadow. The portal. I could feel the elders on the other side, their power suffocating. They were there, just beyond the veil, waiting to cross over. The symbiote reacted with a violent surge. It was drawing the elders closer, guiding them through the portal and into our world. I could feel them, their thoughts brushing against mine. They were ancient, older than the earth itself, and they had been waiting for this moment for millennia. And I was the key. The first of the elders stepped through the portal. It was a towering figure with twisted limbs. Its grey skin was rough and pitted, like decaying leather stretched too thin, cracking to reveal squirming, worm-like formations beneath. Sunken eyes glowed with a yellow light as a drooling mouth with sharp teeth released thick black ichor that bubbled and smoked on the ground. Its presence warped the air around it, distorting reality with a high-pitched whine. Every step it took left behind a sizzling, oily residue that ate away at the stone beneath its feet. This was it. This was the end. More of them followed, each one more terrifying than the last. They filled the church, their bodies too large, too alien to be contained by the physical space. The walls seemed to bend and warp under their weight. The chanting escalated to a nearly unbearable level, with the followers bowing low before the elders, their voices filled with a potent blend of admiration and fear. Riven stared with wide eyes, visibly awed and unsettled. And then, as the last of the elders stepped through the portal, the energy in the church reached a breaking point. The symbiote inside me went wild. My body convulsed, the ropes cutting into my skin as I thrashed against the statue. The elders turned their attention to me. They spoke as one, their voices filling my mind, drowning out the symbiote, drowning out everything. "You have done well, Chosen One. Now you will join us." The portal began to close, the swirling light and shadow collapsing in on itself. I felt the symbiote explode within me, its energy ripping through my body, tearing me apart from the inside out. The pain was indescribable, a white-hot agony that obliterated everything else. I could feel myself unraveling, my consciousness slipping away as the Elder's presence overwhelmed me. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was the portal closing, sealing the Elders into our world, their forms solidifying, becoming more real, more permanent.